Welcome to the MRO Exchange, Connecting Healthcare Executives, your go-to podcast for staying informed in the dynamic healthcare world, where MRO discusses industry trends and topics with prominent healthcare leaders. In each episode, we delve into the intricate landscape of the U.S. healthcare system, shining a light on the immense responsibility shouldered by providers to effectively acquire, manage, and share clinical data with data consumers. Join MRO experts and healthcare executives as they navigate the important dynamics within this highly complex environment. From the surge in healthcare ecosystem demands to the influx of structured and unstructured data scattered across diverse systems, along with the ever-growing compliance, security, and privacy expectations, the MRO Exchange, Connecting Healthcare Executives, unravels it all for you. Tune in for a comprehensive exploration of the pressing issues shaping the healthcare industry today.
Hey everybody, I'm Mark Thomas. Thanks for tuning in to the Exchange, where we connect healthcare executives. And if you want to learn a little bit more about me and my background, you can find that on the MRO website, mrocorp.com. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm super excited today. We have a longtime boss and mentor and colleague and actually a friend of mine today, Bill Moore. We're going to be talking with you a little bit about things happening in technology and healthcare, what's happening from a tech transformation, and probably talk a little bit about AI. But we just wanted to have an exchange on healthcare technology because we hear from you all that that's what you want to hear from us. And so just to welcome our guest today, Bill Moore. He's held several leadership positions in healthcare, including CTO at CareCore National that became Evacor. He was founder of a company called Health Cost, and most recently he's the CIO of Healthmap Solutions. So welcome, Bill, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Mark, and absolutely thanks for having me here. It's great to be back with you, man. We've been friends and we've been colleagues.
That's right. Yeah, it's super good to see you. So why don't you just take a couple minutes and tell us a little bit about, everybody on here knows about MRO because they listen to us all the time. Tell us a little bit about Healthmap and then we'll go from there.
Fantastic. Well, look, Healthmap Solutions is in the kidney disease management space. Our customers are the typical payers, but we're very, very much focused on improving the clinical care, the clinical circumstance of our patients who suffer from various stages of kidney disease up to and including full-on kidney failure. So I would describe us at the highest level as being a population health organization. And what I really mean by that is we collect a great deal of data from really all aspects, all corners of the sort of healthcare delivery continuum. So that would mean claims data, that could mean clinical data, that would mean RX data, personal health information right off of devices with our members and so forth. We bring all that in and we study it at a population level. And we're looking for those clinical insights that we can then apply back to an individual life so that we can really change that clinical journey for that individual patient. And if we do all of that and we do it just right, we're able to improve their care, improve their circumstance, and also lower the cost of care associated with that individual patient. And then we study the effect of all that, and we continue to tune and further hone our models. And I think when I think about it, I'm looking to create that virtuous circle, but get it ever tighter, ever smaller, and ever quicker so that we can be more aggressive with respect to how we address that particular disease state.
Wow, that's awesome. It sounds like exciting stuff y'all are doing. You know, one of the things that I think is probably pretty obvious in what you're having to tackle there at Healthmap, and you and I have done this now several times together, but it's just this, I want to talk a little bit about this topic of technology transformation. You know, it seems like everywhere I go, every conversation I have, people are asking me about transforming technology, or I'll hear executives talk about, I want to transform my technology or my technology team. And one of the cornerstones of the way I do it, being a mathematician, is something that I've been affectionately calling Mark's law of architecture, which essentially goes something like this and says, you know, Conway's law says that communication patterns in organizations will predict the systems that they produce. And then Ron Westrom produced a study that says that high performance culture predicts communication patterns. Well, you put those two things together, you get that ultimately that high performance culture predicts the architecture that you get out of an organization. So as a transformation leader, I always start first with the culture of the organization and start transforming that in a technology organization. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on, and what you faced in handling, transforming a technology organization and really, getting rid of the legacy IT mindset that exists out there.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised that there's probably deep levels of parallelism in the way you look at it and the way I look at it. We spent a lot of years together doing this. I sometimes like to go back to a set of core principles, and maybe in this arena, the most basic of which is I have always believed that the best technology is the most transparent technology. You can think of this in your, personal laptop selection. There are people that select Windows machines. There are people that select Macs. Today, we don't think of those as two separate camps. Those are just sort of selections that people make. And why do they make those selections? Well, they make the selection on the basis of what is the tool they can put in front of them that they spend the least amount of time interacting with sort of the controls and the mechanisms of the tool, and the most amount of time working through that tool to actually execute whatever job role they're trying to do, whatever task they're trying to undertake. If you spend too much time concentrating on the tool, you're not spending enough time concentrating on the task. And if you sort of scale that up from a organizational perspective, I think that the end state from a transformational perspective needs to be, especially for those of us that run IT shops, how can I orient the IT shop around the greater business so that the business can use it as that sort of nearly transparent tool to go out and more quickly, more efficiently, and maybe even with a greater degree of fidelity, attack the marketplace. In our case, I talked about that virtuous circle. How quickly can I close that virtuous circle and allow the individuals who are either clinically minded or business minded or analytically minded to make a change, observe it in the marketplace, bring that data back, and make an additional change to continue to hone it, to continue to refine it, to continue to make it a little bit more focused. If that's where we're really going, then your notion, I think, about the necessity for a philosophical change is a super important one. And I will tell you that, 1990 has come and gone, and the traditional model of what a IT shop would, should, and could look like, and it should have sort of this organizational structure and this number of these people and this number of these people, and no more than this number of people should be managed by, any fewer than this number of managers and so forth. All of that is off. I think all of that leads to a great deal of siloed thinking, which I will tell you in the IT space, I already believe we're a little bit predestined to kind of think in. We already have, in many respects, a different language than most of the business folks that we operate with. We use a different set of tools. I think some of these things tend to make us think that we are in fact different, when in fact, typically, if you check the, the upper left-hand corner of your paycheck, we'd probably find all of us have the same logo there. We're all pulling against the same big weight. And so some of that philosophical siloism has to come down. And from an IT shop perspective, we need to be much, much, much more oriented toward what the organization's really trying to do in the marketplace, as opposed to how we're playing with our Tinker Toys. If you kind of keep those things in mind, my suspicion is that more often than not, the right things kind of align and business starts to run a little bit better.
Well, yeah, you touched on a couple of things that are just so important, I think, to the cultural transformation in technology. One is focusing on business outcomes. I once had a wise mentor tell me that we literally exist to serve the business need, not for the sake of technology, which is what we all want to do. We all want to do the cool things, but if we're not doing those cool things in the guise of actually solving problems that people want solved, then it doesn't matter. It's not important. And another interesting thing you talked about, Bill, that I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about, maybe how you help drive that culture. But For me, it starts with speaking the language of our business partners. Look, I've given up on frankly teaching people to speak the language of technology because it doesn't work anyway and it's constantly changing. That's not what we're here for. We're here to actually, I believe, speak the language of our business partners and ultimately our patients' needs or our providers' needs or our payers' needs. That's what they want to hear from us. And the technology that we use are just tools to get there. They're just tools to get the work done. They're
Yeah.
not the thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, so, how do you help your teams learn to do that?
Well, I think that you have to sort of create moments for folks to be able to sort of palatably context switch. In any IT shop of any scale that is associated with any organization that is on a fast growth pace and winning business and continuing to try to move, sort of the margins forward, at the individual contributors level, on their desks, there are a whole host of pressures. There's always going to be a deadline. There's always going to be, 100 things that you got to get done in a day, and you're lucky if you get, 60, 75 of them done. But when you can create a moment where you can take folks out of that sort of day-to-day grind, which can be very tunnel-like, and you can really connect what it is they do on an everyday basis. For us, it's easy, and I suspect for you as well. At the other end of every line, every record in our various databases and so forth, there's a patient someplace. And in our particular case, that patient has got some debilitating disease that we have a very good capability to improve on for them. That's a pretty noble cause, but it isn't necessarily one that's always at the tip of your nose when somebody's pounding on you for that. Can we get this load done? Can we get this data analyzed? Can we figure out what this production issue is, and so forth? So whenever you can sort of connect those two dots, I think that's very helpful. I will be honest with you. I think the other thing with respect to even the communication inside between the IT shop and the other sort of pillars within the organization, I probably am accused frequently of sort of over communicating, even getting a little preachy, if not just speechy. But I do think that there's value to repetition, and I tell people that. I think there's value in being reminded over and over and over again, sort of where IT fits. You made a reference a moment ago, and it brought me back. You're absolutely right. On our best day, the IT organization inside of a healthcare company, this isn't IT for the sake of IT. We're not Google. This is an IT organization inside of a healthcare company. We're a cost center on our best day. So we've got to be worth it. We've got to be a valued service to the rest of the organization. And you better understand what the other portions of the organization want, need, and desire from you, from that tool, from that capability that we're here to deliver, and how we can accrete that against those individual beating hearts out there somewhere that may just look like, first name, last name, date of birth, and plan ID. But there's a hell of a lot more behind that. There's, someone's mother, father, sister, brother, uncle, you name it. And those are real life experiences. Just connect that dot. Everyone has sort of the internal DNA to do the rest, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. One of the things that we've been doing at MRO to really help close that gap is we've really ramped up our partnership with whether it's product advisory boards, whether it's going out and listening to what our clients have to say about what we're doing and our products and services, and really getting that feedback directly in the hands of the people that are building software. Like I'm just a firm believer in closing the gap between the people that are doing stuff, that are building things and have hands on keyboard, and the people that are using that stuff that they're building. There is no substitute for real world feedback on how your software is performing or if it's meeting the need or not.
No, you're absolutely right. I think in the military there's a term. I think it's something along the lines of the right seat ride. The individual who is developing the software platform, it is probably a very rare thing for them to sit next to the individual who executes it on a day-to-day basis. And by the way, depends on the quality, efficiency, uptime, and capability of that in order to do that very noble thing, to service that individual life under care. I think when they can see that up close, it provides a great deal of that context I talked about a moment ago.
Yeah, 100%. So I got to say, I would probably be remiss if we were to have a technology conversation without mentioning the words AI. So let's do that. Let's it just literally wouldn't be a conversation today. So I would just love to get your thoughts about this overall incredible explosion of AI technologies and the adoption of those technologies in healthcare. How are you seeing that play out? What are your thoughts?
Well, so first off, ripped from the headlines, right? I think whenever you have an AI level conversation, you sort of have to understand your audience a little bit. And the healthcare audience is maybe the same, maybe a little bit different than some of the other audiences out there. I think historically speaking, you and I used to joke about the fact that the healthcare space was a bit of a technology wasteland, or at least that it lagged years and years behind. In fact, I think you and I did a lot of really good work for a lot of really good years where all we really did was curated, maybe cutting edge, but also relatively mature technologies and capabilities from other industries, bringing them into healthcare. And that was always pretty powerful when we did it. AI at some level, I think, has a great opportunity to close that gap. But there are sort of these lingering fears that make a lot of sense in healthcare that may make less sense elsewhere. I think specifically about what I think a lot of folks would be concerned about, which is, are we really in a position where we would, should, or could potentially put AI, or maybe more accurately stated, generative AI, in a position where it may make a clinically significant decision? And that's a reasonable and a righteous fear. But I'm not sure that that's really the path that this is all going to take. I think it's a little bit different. AI in the context is, I think, closer to, and don't get me wrong, I absolutely, positively, unequivocally believe this is one of those watershed shifts that we will see in our career, and we probably won't see many. Maybe this is the biggest one ever. But it's also a product of sort of a quickening of technology and a confluence of technology all at the same time. You could take John Dalton in I think it was the early 1800s, who sort of theorized what atomic theory would, should, and could look like. And Einstein picked that up in the 30s and the 40s, and then sort of suggested how that possibly could end up being something like a great source of energy or other uses. Manhattan Project concludes in 1945 and gives way to the Cold War, which goes from 47 to roughly 1990. And it was really the Cold War, or the fear of an atomic age and the next war, that leads to ARPANET and BitNet. ARPANET and BitNet, I think, are the reasonable beginning of sort of a data democratization, right? Andreessen comes out with NCSA Mosaic, and suddenly anybody can take their data, their content, their intellectual property, their material, and put it out there for the masses. And there isn't a really big difference between then what an individual and a huge corporation can do with respect to their ability to democratize their messaging. I think that quickly leads to hyperscalers, and hyperscalers to big data, and big data gives way to ML, and ML to AI, and AI ultimately to Gen AI. So if you sort of look at that first, 80, 90 years and the last 20 years, there is a huge shift in the speed at which these things have been assembled. Nowhere along the way did we really derail too much. I think we generally got more positive out of those kinds of evolutions than not. I think today, not necessarily generative AI, but traditional AI, if there is such a thing yet, in a diagnostic-like role, can be very much an aid to the clinical mind. If you think about it, let's take rheumatology as an example. In rheumatology, we have these biologic drugs, and they are among the most expensive classes of drugs out there, quite literally. And not every biologic drug works for every patient. But when you find a patient that does match up with the right drug, then they're incredibly powerful, and they can absolutely change the quality of life for an individual. And so if you think about the ability for something like AI to close down the time frame, to remove some of the guesswork and say, is it going to be the first or the second drug that the clinician provides that is going to be the effective one that effectively turns off that switch and changes profoundly that patient's life? That's a heck of a lot better than spending 6, 9, 12, 18, conceivably 24 months trying other drugs until you stumble across the right connection. That's not necessarily AI making a clinically significant decision. That's AI foreclosing some inappropriate or perhaps less effective clinical roads. I think those are the kinds of immediate initiatives that AI makes sense on in healthcare. I really feel it the same way an MRI or a CT scan. It's another diagnostic. It's another modality for aiding the clinical mind.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I view it kind of in a maybe an oversimplified framework of, to me, it's about getting computers doing what computers should do and getting people doing what people should do. Because the reality is that we're a long, long way, even with all the advancements of Gen AI and everything, from a computer truly reproducing the complex problem solving that a human really can do. So to me, it's about just another tool in the tool chest to help humans do what humans really need to be doing better. And that's the framework I've tried to think about this.
Sure,
Right.
AI at work alongside the physician doing things like documenting the case, so that you
Right.
don't let sort of the human frailty and frankly the human predilection toward being a little bit lazy. Is it worth writing that down? Is it worth recording that one additional piece of information? Does that really make a difference? AI doesn't think that way. AI has, perfect focus and perfect function all day, every day. We don't know, but in 10 or 12 or 15 years, or maybe a heck of a lot less, organizations like mine that operate at population health levels, that are using machine learning algorithms to surface deep patterns, might need just that piece of information that in 2024, Dr. So-and-so didn't quite have the time or energy to write down, but the AI assistant absolutely documented perfectly. That's another great example where I think it becomes a wind at the back as opposed to a headwind. And so in those kinds of spaces, I think it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, it's like there's two frameworks. There's you can adopt AI to to make you work more efficiently. Then there's a lot of what you described earlier, this kind of groundbreaking, innovative kind of AI. I think it's important as like a technology leader, I try to compartmentalize those two things and really ground on what I'm trying to achieve when I'm doing an AI initiative. A couple of examples that we're doing here. One, we're building some machine learning algorithms that help us just patient match better. I mean, again, it's stuff that like our team and our people, and we can have some deterministic rules that do that today, but leveraging machine learning absolutely will do it better, right? Than what we're doing it before, right? But that's not some giant innovative thing, but it might shave minutes or days off of the request cycle for achieving a patient request. That's important. No, over thousands of times, that adds up.
So help me, because that's a great point. I think there are still sort of some core issues that have always been around the data space that still need to be honored here, and they bleed into the space. Issues of data provenance and data lineage and data ownership and so forth. In the big Gen AI models, where most smaller or even medium organizations don't have access to the GPUs in the silicon to really train, you're using externalized models, large language models, whatever they may be. You're using external language or external models that have been trained elsewhere on large sums of data where you don't necessarily understand the provenance and the lineage. And of course, that leads to a level of concern, distrust. There are governance holes. There are all kinds of things there. So if that's a big issue with Gen AI, what you're doing to bring the AI technology and the AI function inward and addressing then your own data sets where you do control things like the provenance and the lineage. I think there's a great deal of value in that. And that's frankly an area where the industry, and now I don't necessarily mean the healthcare industry, I mean the tech industry, needs to do more, but is also, I think, making great strides. You don't see it really pervasively yet, but there are a number of hyperscalers and frankly, a number of new entrants into the hyperscalers who are building facilities which will really sort of almost go back to the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, where you could get sort of machine time on, at the time, supercomputers. Right. This would be to be able to get machine time where you bring the data, they provide the GPU cooling, power, and so forth, and you can train your own models. And then you can bring that model back, and now you've created a real intellectual property. You could use it internally, or you could use it under licensing means, but you also have controlled those inputs. And, I sort of gave you that long litany and sort of that, I think I tried to describe it during the course of it, sort of that hockey stick arc on how there's this quickening. We now, as individual organizations, have at our fingertips, I think, the ability to garner more of this data, and we're finally getting it. I mean, we used to say big data, but now I think we've really, at some level, arrived at a usable corpus of big data, where you can take a large content of data all gathered in or about your organization and really begin to put these tools to work and really begin to look for those insights, and then really begin to, at least in the case of what we're doing, take those population level insights and focus them all the way down to that single individual life and externalize that in some kind of an impactful way, where we get that nudge, we get to change that heart, that mind, or that human behavior that actually improves, the individual patient. So we go from hardware to software all the way through to wetware and back again. And that's pretty powerful stuff. And it's not a noble place to be.
Yeah, you hit on it perfectly, because the other thing that I'm seeing, there's a little bit of fear, right? It's new technology. It's got its own challenges. And recently a colleague of mine, Matt Wildman, who was on our podcast last week, was asking me about this concept of adopting AI at the speed of trust, which is really a lot of what's going on. And so as a technology leader, my role is to bring these new technologies into the organization and help drive value with them, is saying, okay, let's start in an area where we can trust it, to your point, right? Let's not worry about the big and the unknown out there, but where we can trust it are in these targeted areas. And we build that trust over time. And some of those fears are going to go away. But again, just through the natural course, we were all afraid of cloud adoption when it first started coming around, right? The great debate of on-prem versus cloud. And now I don't know of anybody that debates those things anymore. Now it's like, if the work belongs in the cloud, put it in the cloud. If it belongs on-prem, put it on-prem. It's just another tool in the tool chest. Sure. AI will be that for us at some point.
Fear sharpens us, but it's also just another emotion. Put it to work.
Right. That's right. Well, I want to ask you one last question, Bill, and then we'll wrap things up for today. But since we're talking about AI, and fear is an obvious one, but are there any other big barriers you see to healthcare as an industry really starting to leverage this tool? Anything that we can do to help remove those barriers?
I appreciate the question. And maybe what I would do is I would point back to an earlier comment. I'm not sure I tied it off real well, but this is a great moment to do it. I suggested that in our earlier careers, you and I spent a lot of time bemoaning the fact that we had somehow ended up in healthcare technology, and that, I think there was even a moment where I probably said things like, if you want to or you want to make a difference in healthcare, step one, don't come from healthcare.
Right.
Well, I've been here too long now. That's no longer a valid statement, so I've withdrawn. I think that the gap that many of us have traditionally seen between sort of traditional tech and then sort of the state of tech in healthcare is closing quickly. And I do believe this last 15 or 20 minutes of conversation is deeply rooted in the solution that eventually brings us, I think, to parity, if not doesn't sort of propel healthcare to the pointy end of the spear, if not at least closer to the pointy end of the spear, with respect to how we can take the 2024 version of all those sort of technology and technology moments that I referenced a few moments back and focus them into something a great deal more powerful that really benefits all of us in a profound way, and frankly puts healthcare out in front of a whole lot of other industries that are probably doing a lot less profound things. I think it's great that we live in a consumer-driven world where you can snap your fingers and order something at 2 a.m. and by 6 a.m. it's probably sitting on your porch and doesn't take anything but, a few keystrokes to do it. That's great. But the ability to literally add years to people's lives and quality to those years is even better. And that's not a bad business to be in either.
I could not agree with you more. We're living in a really exciting time, and I think it's one of those that sometimes you just get lucky and all the stars line up. But when you just think about the technology stars that are lining up with what we do, it's a really exciting place to be and making a difference in healthcare. So, Bill, I really appreciate your time today. It was a ton of fun catching up. Looking forward to doing it again. And to all our listeners out there, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the MRO Exchange, where we connect healthcare execs. For more insights and to hear other healthcare executives' exchanges, visit the show's page on MROcorp.com and be sure to explore additional resources and thought leadership articles. You can also check out the program page on healthcarenowradio.com. Finally, be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn or X at MRO Corp. Until we talk again, this is the MRO Exchange, where healthcare execs connect.